"Sir, this area is for registered guests only. You need to leave." The words landed in the middle of a quiet lobby, sharp enough to make the concierge at the far desk look up from her screen. A woman in a pressed charcoal blazer had stepped directly in front of a man, seated in one of the low linen chairs near the window. Her name tag read Brittany Soren, Guest Relations Manager. She was 34, precise and certain in the way people are certain when they have never been wrong in front of an audience. The man she was speaking to did not move. Theo Marsh, 38, sat with one ankle crossed over his knee, a paper cup of coffee in his left hand, and a worn canvas duffel bag at his feet. No laptop open, no phone raised. Just a man sitting in a chair, watching the late morning light push through the floor-to-ceiling glass of the Alderton Grand Hotel in downtown Chicago. He wore dark jeans, a grey Henley, and the kind of plain sneakers that cost nothing, or cost everything depending on who made them. His face was calm, not the calm of someone suppressing something, the calm of someone who had no reason to be anything else. "I'm sorry," Theo said. Brittany folded her hands in front of her, professional and patient in the way that was designed to feel like a favor. "This is the Alderton Club Lounge. It's reserved for platinum-tier members and guests of registered suites." She paused, eyes moving briefly to his bag. "Do you have a room key?" Theo took a slow sip of his coffee. "I do. Then I'll need to see it." He set the cup on the small side table, opened the front pocket of the duffel, and placed the key card on the table between them. Brittany picked it up. She held it the way people hold things they have already decided are wrong. She walked to the desk terminal by the lounge entrance, swiped the card, and read the screen. The screen showed what it showed. She came back. "I see your name here," she said, "but I'm going to need to verify this with the front desk. There may have been a system issue." Theo looked at her for a moment. "What kind of system issue?" "Sometimes cards get duplicated. It's a security precaution." He nodded once, slow. "Then duplicate the check." Brittany's jaw tightened at the corners. She was not accustomed to being redirected by the person she was redirecting. "Sir, if you could just wait at the front desk while we—" "I'll wait here," Theo said. "I'm already sitting." A short silence dropped between them. 3 other people in the lounge had gone still. A man in a business suit near the beverage station had turned slightly. The way people turn when they want to watch something without looking like they're watching. A woman with silver-streaked hair at the table by the window had lowered her reading glasses. A younger man near the door with a laptop open had stopped typing. Brittany straightened. "I understand, but this is the club lounge, and until verification is complete—" "You already swiped the card," Theo said. "What did the screen say?" She did not answer. "What did it say?" he asked again. "It showed your name. Then we're done verifying." Brittany blinked. Something shifted behind her eyes. Not embarrassment, not yet. Frustration. The particular frustration of someone whose script has lost its next line. She turned on her heel and walked back to the desk. The man in the business suit went back to his coffee. The woman with the reading glasses did not go back to her book. Her name was Frances Whitmore. She was 67, a retired appellate judge from Atlanta who had seen this kind of scene more times than she could count in her career. And every time since in the outside world, where no one wore robes and no one had to follow rules about how they treated people. She watched Theo set his coffee back down and pick up nothing. Just sit. She watched the way he did not look around for approval, did not check if anyone had seen, did not rehearse indignation in his expression. She thought, that is someone who has done this before, been here before. Learned a long time ago that the loudest voice in the room is rarely the most powerful one. Brittany returned 2 minutes later. She brought a man with her. His name was Douglas Farr. 51, head of hotel security. Broad chest, careful walk, a radio clipped to his belt that he had not reached for yet, but wanted to. He stationed himself slightly behind Brittany and to the left, close enough to be a statement. "Sir," Brittany said. In the interest of other guests, we'd like to ask you to step into the hallway while we complete verification. Theo looked at Douglas, then back at Brittany. Why is security here? He said. It's standard procedure. For what? Checking a key card. Douglas cleared his throat. It's just to keep things calm, sir. I'm the only calm person in this conversation, Theo said. The man in the business suit stopped pretending not to listen. His name was Preston Holt, 44, an insurance broker from Indianapolis flying home after a conference. He had arrived at the lounge 20 minutes earlier and had watched the whole thing from the moment Brittany crossed the floor. He had been telling himself it wasn't his business. He was still telling himself that, but his hands weren't moving anymore. The woman at the laptop near the door, Lydia Cantu, 29, was a paralegal from Phoenix traveling for a deposition. She had recognized the scene quickly. Not from law school, from life. Her thumb moved to her phone without her quite deciding to. Brittany leaned forward slightly. Sir, I've spoken with the front desk. There's a notation on the account that needs to be reviewed before we can confirm occupancy. Theo's expression did not change. What notation? She paused. I'm not able to share account details here. You're using account details to remove me from where I'm sitting. I think you can share what they say. A sharp beat of quiet. Frances Whitmore set down her glasses. Excuse me, Frances said, not loudly, not performing, just clearly. Her voice carried the practiced weight of a woman who had spoken into silent courtrooms and had learned exactly how much volume a word needed. I've been sitting here for 25 minutes. That gentleman arrived before I did. He was in this seat when I walked in. He has not raised his voice. He has not bothered anyone. He showed his key card. Brittany turned toward her with the smooth pivot of someone trained to redirect complaints. Ma'am, I appreciate. I'm not finished, Frances said. Brittany stopped. I want to know, Frances continued, on what grounds you involved security. Not policy. Grounds. Douglas shifted his weight. His hand moved once toward his radio, then down again. Theo watched Frances. He said nothing, but something in his face changed. Not gratitude exactly. Recognition. Brittany's voice tightened. We have the right to verify any guest in the club lounge. Then verify, Frances said. You swiped his card. What did you find? The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than before. Before, it had been spectator silence, the waiting kind. Now, it was the kind that had picked a side. Brittany's shoulders lifted half an inch, the same way they do when a person is about to say something they know is not defensible and say it anyway. There may be a discrepancy between the name on the card and the registered guest, she said. Theo's head tilted slightly. My name is on the card. Yes, and on the registration. That's what we're verifying. You verified it already. His voice was even. The screen showed my name, same name on my ID. The card scanned. So I'd like to understand what discrepancy you're referring to. Brittany looked at him. He looked back at her. Preston Holt put down his coffee cup. He stood up, slowly, not rushing, not performing. He walked 3 steps to the side and stood where Brittany and Douglas could see him. I've been sitting here the whole time, he said. I watched her swipe the card. It worked. I watched her face when it worked. He paused. Nothing was wrong with the card. Brittany turned to him with ice around her voice. Sir, please let us handle this. I'm a guest here too, Preston said. I'm allowed to be in this room. So am I. Lydia, Cantu said from near the door, without looking up from her phone, her voice flat and direct as a fact. Brittany moved her eyes from person to person. The story she had been writing since she crossed the lobby floor was beginning to lose its narrative. She could feel it. The way air feels before a front moves in. She turned back to Theo. Mr. Marsh, he said. Theo Marsh. Mr. Marsh, I'm going to need to ask you one more time to step outside while we... No. The word was short, quiet, and absolute. It did not fill the room. It did not need to. Theo reached into the duffel bag. Douglas tensed. Theo did not rush, did not acknowledge the tension, did not perform patience for the audience. He simply moved at his own pace. He removed a flat, matte black phone case, opened it and set it on the table. Then he looked at Brittany. "I want you to call the general manager," he said. "Right now." Brittany laughed, not with humor, with nerves wrapped in professional packaging. "I am the senior guest relations manager. Any issue is handled through my office." "Call the general manager," Theo said again. Same tone, same pace. Douglas spoke up. "Sir, there's no need to escalate." "There is," Theo said, "because the key card was valid. The name matched. The verification you performed confirmed my registration, and you still called security." He looked at Douglas. "That means this was never about the card." The lobby beyond the glass doors of the lounge hummed with its ordinary business. Check-ins, luggage carts, a family near the elevator, sunlight moving across marble. Inside the lounge, no one moved. Frances had stopped reaching for her glasses. Lydia Cantu had stopped looking at her phone. Preston Holt stood where he had walked. Still, Brittany's face had pulled tight, the way faces do when the inside of an argument begins to collapse and only the exterior is still holding. "Mr. Marsh," she said, quieter now, "I'm trying to maintain a comfortable environment for all our guests." "Who found this uncomfortable?" Theo said. "She did not answer before you walked over here. Who complained?" "No answer. Point to the guest who said I made them uncomfortable." The room sat with that question for a long moment. Then, the door from the service corridor opened, and a woman walked in with the purposeful stride of someone who had left the middle of something important to get here. Her name was Corinne Ashby, 49, general manager of the Alderton Grand for 11 years. She had short natural hair, reading glasses pushed up on her head, and the expression of someone managing 3 things simultaneously and disliking that this had become a 4th. Her assistant had texted her 4 words, "Lobby lounge." "Come now." Corinne had come. Her eyes moved across the room in one sweep, Theo sitting, calm, hands loose, Brittany standing, tight, Douglas slightly behind, uncertain, 3 other guests still as furniture. She was good at reading rooms. She had been reading rooms since she was 9 years old. "What's happening here?" she asked, voice direct. Not loud. Brittany moved immediately. "Mrs. Ashby, we have a guest who arrived in the club lounge without proper verification. When I went to confirm his registration, he refused to cooperate and began making the other guests uncomfortable." Theo looked at Brittany. Just looked. Corinne looked at him too. "Sir," she said evenly, "I'm the general manager. May I ask your name?" "Theo Marsh." She nodded. "Can you walk me through what happened from your side?" Brittany started to cut in. Corinne raised one hand slightly, fingers together. Brittany stopped. Theo said, "I came into the lounge. I've been a member of this hotel's platinum program for 6 years. I'm staying in suite 1408, which I booked directly through the property account. I sat down. Your guest relations manager approached me and told me this area was for registered guests only. I showed the key card. She swiped it. It verified. She told me there might be a discrepancy. I asked what discrepancy. She couldn't say. Then she called security." Corinne was quiet for a moment. "Douglas," she said without turning, "did the card verify?" Douglas answered immediately, "Yes, ma'am." "Was there a discrepancy in the system?" A pause, nose. Corinne turned to Brittany. Brittany's chin lifted. "I had reason to believe." "What reason?" The room leaned in. Brittany's voice dropped. "He didn't look like." She stopped herself, but the sentence had already left its first 2 words in the air. "He didn't look like." Frances Whitmore exhaled, slow and heavy, like a woman releasing something she had been holding for a very long time. Preston Holt looked away from Brittany toward the window, jaw tight. Lydia Cantu set her phone face down on her knee and stared at the wall. Corinne Ashby stood very still. "I want everyone to hear what was just almost said," she said quietly, not to the room, not performing. Just finishing the sentence that needed finishing. She had reason to believe, because he didn't look like. Brittany's composure cracked at one corner, near the eyes. "That is not what I meant." Then what did you mean? Corinne said. The question stayed unanswered for 3 full seconds. Theo reached into his phone case. He removed a card, matte black, no embossing, just clean text, and set it on the table face up this time. Corinne looked down. She read the name. She read the line beneath it. Theo Marsh, founder and CEO, Marsh Capital Group. Member, Alderton Private Holdings Board of Directors. Her face did not drain the way Thomas Blake's had drained on the airplane in other stories. In other moments that somehow kept repeating themselves across decades and lobbies and cabins and counters. Corinne was not that kind of person. Her face simply went still, the way still water goes still, flat and deep and giving nothing back. She picked up the card. She read it again. Slowly this time. Marsh Capital Group held a 12% equity stake in Alderton Private Holdings, the parent company of the Alderton Grand chain. Theo had held that stake for 4 years. He had voted in 2 board elections, signed off on 2 capital improvement rounds, and had mentioned once in a quarterly meeting that he was bothered by the inconsistency of how guests at various properties were treated based on appearance rather than record. He had said it in a room full of suits and slides and had not said it loudly, and it had not been written into the minutes as anything more than a general comment about brand standards. But Theo had noted the date. Corinne set the card down. She looked at him. "Mr. Marsh." Her voice was careful. "I owe you a direct apology." Theo held her gaze. "I want the apology to be the last thing we talk about," he said. "Not the first." She waited. "I want to understand," Theo said, "what your staff member was trained to do versus what she chose to do. Because if this comes from training, that's the institution's failure. If it comes from choice, that's a different conversation. But either way, it happened in front of witnesses, on camera, with a valid key card verified in real time." Brittany made a sound, half protest, half collapse. "I was protecting the lounge." Theo turned to her. His voice did not rise. "From what?" She had no answer. "What threat did I present? I had a verified card, a registered suite, a 6-year membership. I was sitting in a chair with a cup of coffee." He paused. What was I protecting the lounge from being? The answer lived in the space between them, unspoken and understood by everyone in the room. Douglas Farr unclipped his radio from his belt and held it in his hand without purpose. He looked at it like a man realizing too late that he brought the wrong tool to the wrong kind of problem. Francis Whitmore spoke again, not loudly, not with the theatrical weight of a declaration, just plainly, as people speak when the moment has stopped needing performance. "I want to say, for whatever record is being kept here, that I arrived in this lounge after Mr. Marsh. I was not asked to verify anything. I was greeted and given a menu." She paused. "I think everyone in this room knows why." No one argued. Lydia Cantu said from where she sat, "I've been here for almost an hour." Same thing. No one checked anything. Preston Holt said, "Same." Brittany's face had gone past, flushing into something paler and harder and more frightened. She looked at Corinne. "I followed. Procedure." Corinne shook her head, once small. "You followed instinct. That's different. That's worse." Theo watched Corinne say it. He recognized the sentence because he had thought it before, many times in many rooms. He was not certain that hearing it said out loud by someone with authority was going to change anything beyond this lobby on this morning. But he was still glad it was said. He picked up his phone and placed a call. It rang once. A voice answered, clipped and professional. "Marsh Legal, you're on speaker." Brittany pressed one hand to the base of her throat. Theo did not look at her. He looked at Corinne. "A formal record opened," he said into the phone. "Date, time, location, guest relations incident. Alderton Grand Chicago, Club Lounge. Keycard verified. Registration confirmed. Security called without cause. Full witness list will follow." The voice on the phone said, "Understood. Are you requesting a hold on current property operations pending review?" Theo looked at Douglas, then at Brittany, then back at Corinne. "Not yet," he said. "I want the facts stated clearly first. He lowered the phone and looked at each person in the room, slowly, not with anger, not with theatre. "Himsims? Ashby," he said. "I'm going to ask you 3 questions and I want you to answer in front of everyone here." Corinne stood straight. "Yes. Was my keycard valid?" "Yes. Did any guest in this lounge report discomfort with my presence before your staff approached me?" A pause that cost Corinne something. "No. Was security called before or after my registration was confirmed?" Corinne looked at Douglas. Douglas said, "After." The word hit the room like something dropped from a height, not before the verification. After. After the system had confirmed his name, his suite, his membership. After the truth had been available to anyone who looked. Security had still been called, because the truth had not been the point. Frances Whitmore sat very still and breathed through her nose. Preston Holt stared at the floor. Lydia Cantu had started writing on her phone, not recording now, writing down what she was hearing, the way a paralegal writes things down when she understands that the document will matter later. Theo raised the phone back to his mouth. "Proceed with the record. Flag it for board review." Brittany's voice came out thin and cracked at the edges. "You can't just." "I'm not just," Theo said. He turned to face her for the last time, and his voice was quiet and final and utterly without cruelty. "You decided something about me before you reached my chair. You decided before you saw the card. You decided before you knew anything at all. And when the facts disagreed with your decision, you called for backup rather than correct it." He paused. "That is not a policy failure. That is a personal one." Brittany looked at him. For a moment, something moved through her face that might have been the beginning of understanding, the kind that arrives too late and lives with you anyway. Corinne spoke to her then, quietly, the way doors close. "Brittany, I need you to go to my office. Douglas, please follow. I'll be there in 5 minutes." She looked at them both. This conversation is not over. They left. The lounge settled around their absence. Corinne turned to Theo. "Mr. Marsh," she said. "What do you need from me right now?" Theo looked at his coffee, which had gone cold. He looked out the window at the city, doing its ordinary business outside. Then he looked at her. "The record I just opened will include a recommendation for mandatory bias response training. Not optional, not as a module in a quarterly checklist. Mandatory, for every guest-facing role in this property." He looked at her steadily. "And I want the board to receive a formal summary of this incident within 48 hours, with my name on it as a witness, not as a complainant, as a board member who was present." Corinne nodded. "I'll draft it myself." "Good." She started to say something else. He waited. "I want to apologize," she said. "Not for procedure, for what happened in this room, for the fact that you had to answer for a card that had already answered for itself." Theo was quiet for a moment. "I've been answering for cards that already answered for themselves my whole life," he said. "In office lobbies, in parking garages, at conference check-ins, in first class, in rooms I helped build." He did not say it with heat. He said it the way you say something you have simply carried long enough that it has lost the weight of surprise. "What I need is not the apology. What I need is for it to stop requiring one." Corinne held his gaze. Her eyes were clear and undefended, and she did not look away. Frances Whitmore watched from her chair. She thought about 30 years of rulings, about the space between what the law said and what the room felt, about how many times she had sat on an elevated bench in a black robe and thought, "The robe is doing the work I should not need it to do," she thought. That man in the grey Henley did not need a robe today. He sat in a chair. He kept his hands still. He waited for the truth to arrive on its own, because he knew it would, because it always does, and because he had learned long ago that the people who panic when it arrives are the ones who never believed it was coming. "Mr. Marsh," Frances said. He looked at her. "Thank you," she said. "Not for standing up, not for handling it, not for anything that framed what had happened as a performance. Just thank you." He nodded. "Thank you for not staying out of it." She smiled. something small and real. I spent 40 years teaching people the difference between a procedure and a principle. Hard to unlearn on a Tuesday. The lounge slowly returned to itself. Lydia Cantu finished what she was writing and put her phone in her bag. Preston Holt picked up his coffee, drank the rest of it cold, and sat back down. The concierge at the far desk resumed her work. Somewhere beyond the glass, a luggage cart rolled across marble, and the city exhaled its ordinary exhale. Theo Marsh sat in the linen chair with his canvas duffel at his feet and his cold coffee and his matte black phone case, and said nothing more for a while. He did not need to. The board received its report in 36 hours. Brittany Soren was placed on administrative suspension pending a conduct review. Douglas Farr filed an incident report and requested additional training, an act that would later be noted as the most honest thing he had done in his 12 years with the hotel. Corinne Ashby submitted the mandatory training proposal herself, with a cover memo that was 4 paragraphs long and used the word dignity twice, both times without quotation marks. The report included statements from Francis Whitmore, Preston Holt, and Lydia Cantu. All 3 had stayed to give them. None of them had been asked twice. In the memo Theo submitted to the Alderton Holdings Board, he wrote 1 paragraph that was not about protocol or response timelines or brand standards. He wrote, "The failure in that room was not that my status went unrecognized. The failure was that a person in a chair, with a valid key card and a quiet manner, was treated as a problem to be removed rather than a guest to be served. Status should not have been required to correct that. The fact that it was is what this board must sit with." The board sat with it, and on a Tuesday morning in downtown Chicago, in a linen chair by a window with cold coffee and no apology that arrived fast enough to matter, Theo Marsh had simply stayed seated, exactly where he had always had the right to be.